Okay, our root word for first quarter is going to be act. Now, if you remember, I said that a lot of root words can't stand by themselves as just plain old ordinary words. Well, interestingly enough, this first word that we're doing, act, can stand on its own. We can act in a play. We can act foolish in front of our friends. But we're not going to be talking about the word act just as a word on its own. We're going to be talking about act as a root. And remember that roots are little parts that help us figure out what words mean. The root word act, it's easy enough to remember. It just means to do. Okay? So everything that you're talking about, if it's got the word act in it, it's going to have something to do with some kind of action. Like action has the word act in it. Before we jump into our words, let's look at the affixes that we're going to use. Remember, affixes is the generic term that could mean prefixes, so little parts of words that come at the beginning, or suffixes, which are the little parts that come at the end. We're going to start out talking about the prefixes. The first one that we're going to look at is inter, okay? And the prefix inter means between. And the thing I'd like you to kind of remember is the interstate highway. The interstate highway system goes between the states. All right. When we're talking about counter, which is our second prefix, we're not talking about the kitchen counter that you can set the salt and pepper shaker on. We're talking about a little piece of a word that goes at the beginning. And when we use counter as a prefix, it means against. So if something is counterproductive, that means that it is working against what you're trying to do. So if I'm trying to get good grades, it would be counterproductive to sleep in class. It would work against, because counter means against. The last prefix we're going to talk about is one that I'm thinking people have a little more experience with, and that is re. And the prefix re just means again. Like if you don't do well on a paper, you want to rewrite it or write it again. Looking at the suffixes, the two that we're going to look at for right now are just suffixes that do different things with parts of speech. So the ion and tion, those just turn a word into a noun, turn it into a thing. And then IVE, in the case that we're going to be looking at, turns the word into an adjective. Our first word is going to be interaction, and this is a good one to start with because it contains both a prefix and a suffix as well as the root word, obviously. We look at this ion, and okay, we know that this is a noun, a thing that we're going to be doing. All right, and we look at our prefix, inter, we think back, okay, what did inter mean? Oh yeah, it means between. Okay, and then in the middle we've got our root word act, which means like something you do. So an interaction is something you do between people. You know, it can be verbal, it can be talking. It can be nonverbal. We can interact just by using, you know, body language and gestures. But basically, interaction is things that happen between two things. This is another good one because it also has both a prefix and a suffix. So we've got IVE, which in this case is going to mean, oh, hey, I know this word is an adjective. It can be used to describe something. And then we've got this little prefix, counter, and I think back like, oh yeah, counterproductive is two things working against each other. Okay, and then in the middle again, we've got act, which is something you do. So when something is counteractive, it's something you do that works against something. So it's very similar to counterproductive. So it would be very counteractive for me to, sleep through class and never study if I feel like getting good grades. And here's a nice short one, react, and I think it's a word that people are used to seeing. If you react to something, you act in response. And if we look, we've got act, which is our root word, it's doing something, and then we've got which means again. But in this case, we're not acting again like we're doing the same thing over again. We're acting again in response to something that someone has done. So if react was the verb, it's the thing you do, acting in response to someone, we now added this little ion. If you remember, the tion or the ion makes it a noun, meaning that this is the thing you do. When you react, you have a reaction. This is the thing you do when something else happens. Okay, so now we've taken that word react and we've turned it into reaction. And now we're taking the word reaction and we're tacking something else onto the end to make the word reactionary. So you may remember having heard the word reactionary in social studies this fall when you were talking about the political spectrum. And they're talking about how a reactionary is a person on the far right who wants things to go back to the way they are in the past. Basically, when we're talking about a reactionary, we're talking about a person, okay, who is reacting to the things happening around them. In the political sense, what you were talking about earlier this year in social studies, the person is reacting to what they see happening in the world around them and they want things to go back to how they were in the past. But bigger picture, a reactionary is just a person who reacts to things. And then if we think back, okay, what did react mean? Because I'm using the word react to define a word that has react in it. Means to respond to something that happens. So a reactionary is a person who really responds strongly to things that are happening around them. All right, now we're going to go into two words that don't quite fit as neatly with the prefixes and suffixes that we've already talked about. When we're talking about the word actual, basically for the purposes of this unit and this assignment, you just need to know that the word actual means real, current, whatever. So my actual name is, then you give your real, full, current name. How it relates to the word act is a little more complicated, but for the purposes of this unit, just know that it means real. And our last one is redact. And redact is a very interesting, very specific word. So let's say that you are a secret government agent, okay? And you write up a document that details a whole bunch of information. And then the government has to release some of it to the world. What they're going to do is go in and redact, which means they'll read through this document that you've made and they'll say, this isn't something I want the world knowing, so we're going to cross this part out, and this is a little sensitive, let's cross this out, this stuff's okay, here, this is no good, ooh, this part's no good, and this word. Okay, so now I've got a document that has some of the information, but some of the things that I don't need the world knowing have been redacted out. So it just means to take out and cover up the information that is sensitive and that you don't want the world to see. All right, I hope this helped, and I hope you have a wonderful day. And Shabilsky out.